When do you know it's time to say goodbye to your best friend? So it's a hard one. It's really hard. I want to say straight away though that as soon as you start looking for things like this, unless you're just one of those people that's just looking because you're curious and you want to be prepared in X amount of years time, if your dog is old and you're looking for stuff like this, or you've put on Facebook things like this, how do you know when it's time? And you've done a whole list of reasons of what's going on in your dog's life, how they're walking, their toilet issues, what they're eating, with a picture of them looking, very skinny and not much muscle tone anymore. The truth is, you already know. I'm really sorry to say this, but you do already know. What you're trying to do is justify it. You don't need to justify it. You're giving all these reasons, this list, the things you're saying to people, the things you're writing down on social media about, oh, he has a lot of accents, but I don't mind that. No, I know you don't mind that. You keep going to the bitter end. That's your job as a guardian. But dogs, it's really important, and animals, they're not like us in the sense that they kind of have this awareness of life and ongoing life. What's really important to them is that they don't suffer, and that should be important to you. Most people kind of come to terms with it over a week, and there is the saying that 2 weeks too early is better than a week too late. And pretty much everybody, especially the first dog or a really beloved dog or pet, is always a week too late. It just always is. I think you get better at it. I'm hoping so. I feel like with Sky, it was too late. I feel like I did already know before, and then I let it get too far. Like she was pooing in the house, a foot from the door with the door wide open, type of thing. And at first I thought, oh, she's just nuts. She doesn't know what's going on. And I was angry, admittedly, like, why is this happening? Can she not control herself? Things like that. But then when I sat down and thought about it, I thought, no, she's in pain. She's in pain. The hunching over to poo is causing her pain. And despite the fact she was on a lot of painkillers, but, she's on a Librela injection, which gives them a lot of years, but it doesn't give them forever. And pain does get stronger and stronger and stronger. And it's just not right to keep them alive. And you know this. And you're feeling guilty because you have to make this decision. And it feels a bit like playing God, which no one wants to do. But the fact is, we control their whole lives. We control when they eat, what they eat, where they go. If they go on lead, off lead, we control the amount of training they get, their socialisation. Everything is controlled by us. So it makes sense that actually their death should be controlled by us as well. There's no reason for them to suffer. Even in the wild, they just wouldn't be suffering. It's very likely that another animal would attack them, and then that would be it. When they don't live to this long, this unnaturally long in the wild, there is suffering in the wild. And it's things like, when wolves in particular, they suffer a lot with broken teeth. So, a lot of them kind of can end up starving to death, which is quite sad. But even that, it's only about a week or so. It's not the amount of suffering that we potentially can put on our dogs by just pumping medicine through them and just keeping them alive and alive and alive. That being said, just because your dog's old and a bit doddery, doesn't mean that you can't keep going, and things like, Librela injection and steroid, very, very good, things like that. But it's the little changes, and sometimes when you're caring for the dog so much, Sky had incontinence, so it just became part of life that, pretty much every day I'm clearing up rivers and things like that. So the little changes don't always go noticed, but you really should sit down and have a think. There was a very helpful chart, which is the quality of life chart, which if you're still not sure, then you should look that up, and it kind of scores points on what's going on. Although I do feel like, when I was doing it and tossing up the points, I thought, yeah, she can keep going, when I still knew really in my heart that she can't. And the thing is, it's not going to get better. It's not, and it's not going to stay like this either. So whatever your dog's going through now, it will get worse. And you've got the choice of, do you want to put your dog through that worse scenario? Do you? Because it's not getting better, is it? They're just getting older. And like I said, I'm not saying animals don't fear death. They do. They do. And when I took Sky out, you know, to her final walk, and normally both dogs follow me from the house into the car, no leads. We've been doing that for many years. And she didn't. She came out, and because I was so upset, she just got the vibe and she wouldn't come. She just knew that, you know, something was off, which was terrible. I couldn't hold myself together for those last moments, which I encourage you to do as much as you can, because they're not your your support. They are an animal. You're meant to be supporting them emotionally, really. It's a burden being a support, especially if you've got an unbalanced dog. So you have to be really careful that you don't upset them. You know, Sky, there's no reason for Sky to be upset, because it was the right thing to do. But they will kind of keep going to the bitter end, and that's just instinct. But they don't think like we do, where it's like, oh, I can enjoy this and I can enjoy that, or I just don't want to die, or, you know, some kind of fear about, you know, what happens next, or heaven and hell. They don't have any of that. They just really live in the moment, and if the moment's pain, it's terrible. It's a terrible moment. So you've got to be aware of that, really. I encourage you to listen to my other podcast on how to grieve. Grieving is very, very important, and it's with a guest as well called Erica, and she specialises in grieving pet owners, basically, and helps them get through it. She's not a counsellor, but she's got a website with lots of memorabilia, poems, things like that, things you can get made. So that's all helpful. I actually got Sky. I made a little crotchet animal, like, you know, personalised thing, which I thought was really nice to help. But I've done a whole podcast on that, so go and listen to that as well. This is just about kind of knowing when the time's right, and things like that. And for Sky, I had the opportunity of, you know, I did get her booked in very soon, but like I said, it should have been a lot sooner, but I just wanted everybody to be able to say goodbye and things like that. And I got her on some very strong, hardcore medicine, which is gabapentin, and it is extremely strong. It works on basically the nerves, and it is they do sometimes give it to nervous dogs, which I don't really agree with, because it's an end-of-life medication. And it did change her. She kind of got sprightly, you know, which was really nice to see, but shouldn't have got to the point where she needed that. That should have been my choice. You know, how many of us right now, how many humans die in their sleep? I mean, that's the dream, right? That's what we're all waiting for. That's what we're all hoping for our dogs. I'll just pump them full of medicine and keep them comfortable, and they'll just die in their sleep, and I don't have to face up to that terrible choice. But we do. As soon as you take an animal on, you have a responsibility to give it shelter, the right environment so it can behave naturally, the right food, water, enrichment, and prevent suffering. And this is exactly the same. You're supposed to get your animal medical treatment when it's suffering, and this classes as suffering. Putting the animal to sleep is part of your duty as an owner. That's the thing that you take on. It's a terrible, terrible thing that you have to choose right at the end to say goodbye. And you can do it however way you want. Final walk, final greeting, final meals of burgers and chocolate. You know, that's what we did. And it was nice. It was nice to have that day. And to be honest, it was quite a perfect day. Even though it was a terrible, terrible day, it couldn't have gone any better, weirdly. Make sure your other pets, especially dogs and ones that are close to your dog, see the body. Very important. Otherwise they'll be looking for them and they won't understand where they've gone. So that's very important. I took Flicker with me to the vets, and also I didn't bring her into the vets because obviously it's quite stressful in there, even for the most balanced dogs. Not nice things happen in vets, right? So I got it down in the car, which they're absolutely happy with, so I recommend that. You can get someone out. It usually costs hundreds. I mean, I was quoted £700, So I thought the boot of the car, absolutely fine, and they were fine with that. So that was good. And then when I took her to be buried, I had Flicker with me, so Flicker could see. So that was obviously important as well. It's difficult if you've got somebody else who's saying no, it's not time. That's difficult when you've got differing opinions of what's going on. I mean, my mum's opinion was that I should have got Sky put down years ago. I feel like that's a massive exaggeration because she had so much, fine times. It wasn't like most days were awful and it was the odd day out. Most days she was at home and she got a couple of walks a week, but she wasn't miserable at home. She was a greyhound, so she's just upside down on the sofa, farting. That's what she liked doing. So that's what she did. And then I'd take her out and she'd waddle around. We're not marching anywhere. We'd just go to a field and I'd sit chatting with my mates. She would just lie in the sun. Flicker would do her own thing and just disappear into the woods for a bit and come back periodically like a wild dog that she is. So that's all fine, and I think she did enjoy those years. It was Librela that gave her the last 18 months, if I'm honest, that injection. But it got to a point where I could see it wasn't enough, and something else happened whereby I would touch her and she'd flinch, a bit like when a fly lands on a horse and their skin shivers, and I thought, this isn't right. And again, I should have known, I feel like I should have known better, really, than to pass that off, because when I spoke to the vet, she said what happens is when an animal is in chronic pain, everything hurts, even a touch, and the fact that she couldn't enjoy me stroking her anymore, that's bad. That's bad. But she was okay with the gabapentin and she got to enjoy cuddles and strokes for a few more days. But don't let it get to that. It's very unlikely your dog's going to die in its sleep without having to go through this awful stage. I mean, maybe if I hadn't put her down, she would have lived a week or two, but who wants to live like that? Especially a dog where you can't comfort them with your touch. They don't want to live like that. So, you know what you've got to do, and I am sorry for your loss. And it's tough. And I'm doing this today on a year I lost Sky. And it feels like a month ago. It's really bizarre. Also, another thing I've just got to say, please don't run out and buy another dog. Especially if you've got an elderly dog, they really don't want a puppy or something new happening. But also grieve your dog. Don't run out and buy another one. I see a lot of owners where they've told me a problem behaviour, and that's why I've popped up, right? So I've gone to their house, they're like, oh, I've got this new puppy and it's a nightmare. And I turn up and a lot of the time it's just because they're grieving for their old pet and they can't bond with this one. And it's very difficult, and they keep comparing it, even though they say, oh, it's not the same. They are, because they're constantly talking about the old dog and what the old dog was like, and they can't bond with it, and it's not fair on the new one. So please grieve and take your time before getting a new one. A lot of people go for a completely different dog, breed or colour. I think that's quite important, but sometimes it doesn't matter. I had one lady that her cat had died suddenly through awful circumstances, and she'd got a puppy. And the puppy, from what I could see, was perfect. I've never seen such a calm puppy. And she was borderline hysterical over some of its behaviour. And she said, I don't love it or anything. And yet she was saying, I don't love it. But when it went out and picked up leaves and things in the garden, she was absolutely freaking out. And the reason was actually she was just so traumatised by the cat, she couldn't bear to go through it again. And she did love the dog, but she didn't realise that she did. But it's because she hadn't processed the cat. You've got to go through it. I'm sorry, but you have to. Grief, it has to come out. You can't bury it. So, yes, best of luck. Go have a look at the other podcasts on how to grieve if you need help with that. There's a lot on that. Yeah, it's a heavy few days. If you can take time off work, please do that. Calling sick, mental health is a sickness as well. You don't have to be just bodily sick, if you like. Your head and your heart are part of it as well. So take some time off if you can, and just cry, just mourn, do what you got to do, say goodbye, and mourn. Good luck.
If you're interested in more videos or stuff that I do, I am on TikTok. I usually put my TikTok videos also on Facebook and Instagram, so just search Fawn Dog for those. And the main website is fawndog1to1dogtraining.co.uk. Thanks for listening, guys.